Well, that's horrific.
Yeah, let's do this. From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. You can submit your questions anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. For the third week in a row, Jim is not in the studio. At this time, we'd like to announce that Pod Therapy is accepting applications for a replacement co-host. We'd like to keep with the same dynamics of the show we currently have. So if you're a therapist and you got your bachelor's degree from a made-up university, we want you. And now, broadcasting from the churn, that guy's Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangevin. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
It's like
My
Paul
university.
Revere said, give me liberty or give me a degree.
But you can't have both.
You can't have both. You know, also the
Give
only
me liberty
school that's
or a
immune.
real education.
The only school that's immune to coronavirus, guys. They have God on their side.
That's true.
They're just doing what they do. It's so funny because
they're
whenever
still,
they were doing that, I saw that on the internet, and they were like, "Yeah, you know, Liberty University," and I was like, "This is the reason evangelicalism is dying." Like, literally, like, this is why everybody's dead.
Are they still having classes?
I keep seeing all
I
the
think
things
they finally
about.
shut it down.
I think they did. I think they finally stopped. Well, I think people just stopped going.
Oh, really?
I think their bigger problem. I don't think that they really actively stopped. I think their students just stopped showing up, and they were like, "I guess we're stopping. I guess we have stopped." No, but I keep seeing because I think it's up to like 12 states now that have done the stay-at-home orders, but have exempted churches from the stay-at-home orders.
I did see that.
Oh,
And
God.
I keep seeing people say things like, this is terrible, this is stupid, and everything else. And I keep thinking, if you want to go to a mass gathering, go. But when you go, you get you get a stamp on your health insurance card or whatever it is, saying like, nope, if you get it, you are not allowed to use the nation's resources.
Right. You've done this to yourself.
Like you're signing a liability waiver.
Right.
Saying like, hey, I understand the risks here. And the bad thing is these people don't understand the risks.
Right.
But
that was one of the things. That was one of the things our support group people were telling us last week. And by the way, to the regular listeners, we announced it on the Patreon, but you're going to hear it again at the end of the show. If you'd like to be a part of our Zoom support group, it will be offered again this Thursday. You can find out more at patreon.com/therapy. And again, even if you're not a member of our support, just email us, podtherapyguys@gmail.com, and we will invite you to be part of it. But people were sharing with us last time, Jacob, that because there's folks from all over the country, and there's people in the South, and they were like, dude, the thing that's really driving them crazy is their communities are not taking it seriously. Like, church is still in session, and their governors are telling everybody, yeah, do whatever you want. Like, the governor of Georgia didn't know that you could catch this asymptomatically. He didn't know that.
Yeah, I saw that.
Oh.
Unreal. And he comes out, he's like, oh, well, I didn't really know that, so maybe you guys should stay at home. And it's like, how are you the governor of a state? That's insane.
It's just like, that just means that you haven't watched the news.
Right.
That is like,
Or you've watched the news within a bubble.
right.
A bubble.
But just like someone like me not knowing, I'm a stupid sound guy. Me not knowing details about this global pandemic virus, that's one thing. I'm not in charge of anybody.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not your job to tell people what to do and how they should respond.
Yeah. Like Jim.
Yeah.
Jim has kids. Jim is in charge of other people. Mm-hmm. And like he has a responsibility to at least educate himself to a minimal degree, as he has done his entire life.
Right.
A bare minimum.
Yeah. But like if you're a state leader, you gotta find out about this shit.
Yeah.
Especially
I just want to believe,
especially if you're
you
going
have
to talk
somebody-
about it.
Well, isn't it somebody's job to hand you a piece of paper that says, "Hey, here are the actual facts"? Don't you have somebody whose job that is?
If I was a
Well, no,
politician,
not necessarily, because he's the one giving those jobs out.
yeah, that's true.
God,
if
yeah, I
I was a
guess so.
politician, that's what I would want. Is I'd want to I would have a whole team around me, and their whole job is don't make me look stupid.
Yeah.
Right? Just prepare me for everything. Just don't make me look bad.
Yeah.
And then that would
Don't
be
let
their
me
whole
say
job.
anything dumb. Yeah.
That's the thing, when people talk about the deep state people, when people talk about like the people that are embedded in political machinations and everything, those are the people that they're really talking about.
Yeah.
Because most of the people
Right.
they're talking about, that's the gig.
Right.
Is like, keep this politician from looking like an idiot.
Exactly. Yeah. Wow.
I've been trying for about 45 minutes now, and I'm finally able to sign on to unemployment to
Hey!
file my weekly unemployment
All right.
claim.
Oh my gosh. Congratulations.
It's crawling
Jeez.
along.
Jesus, what a mess. That probably hasn't gotten any easier, has it?
No, mine is done. I'm
So
just
once
I'm just
you're
filing
in-
the weekly thing now. But you have to sign on to it every week.
Does that take long to do?
No.
No?
I mean, not usually it takes me a couple of minutes. Today it's taken me, like I say, I'm hitting about 45 minutes right now, just because the website is overloaded.
Oh, right. Yep. Well, if you want a break from COVID talk, you tuned into the right show, because our A block, for the first time in a while, has nothing to do with COVID.
Hooray!
Yeah, this actually came. I saw this article in Psychology Science. This research that was done at Drexel University. Title of it is "Where in the Brain Does Creativity Come From? Evidence from Jazz Musicians." So this was
So
kind of
it comes
interesting.
from cocaine?
Right.
Wherever in the brain cocaine is stored.
But what they were looking
And
at,
heroin.
yeah, let's
That's
be
where I
fair.
was going with that.
So what they were doing is they were looking at jazz guitarists during improvisation to look and see where in the brain their brain is most active, right? So they kind of talked about it's driven primarily in the right hemisphere for musicians who are comparatively inexperienced at improvisation. However, for musicians that are highly experienced, improvisation relies mostly on their left hemisphere.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Does it?
No.
So this actually got me thinking. This isn't really the A block here, but this kind of got me thinking. We have not yet taken a dive into the whole right brain versus left brain. You've heard of this, I'm sure, Jim, right?
Yeah.
As far as people being right-brained or left-brained.
Jim, you know you're left
Yeah.
and you're right?
Yeah.
Well, that's beside the point. I think that should not be the test of whether I should be on this show. But
Jim's brain is broken down a little bit differently. It's not a right or a left, it's a top or a bottom.
Right.
So Jim is very top-brained, which means he can form complex sentences and communicate them, but he can't sit up in a chair. Like he'll fall over.
But he doesn't know what they mean.
I consider myself a top, but I'm bottom flexible. I consider myself a top,
There you
but I'll
go.
do some bottom work if it's
Right.
needed. Yeah.
I would not describe Jim
So this
as
is a
any
myth?
kind of flexible. There's no kind of
I
flexibility
wouldn't either,
that
yeah.
I would attribute to Jim.
And pretty much any way you define flexibility. There's not.
No.
Yeah. Wow. I'm learning a lot about Jim today.
That's not really learning. That's just realizing.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. No,
I'll
he's
just
not a
read my
flexible
journal if
person.
you guys want.
So, according to popular view, creativity is a product of the brain's right hemisphere. So, innovative people are considered right brain thinkers, right? Whereas left brain thinkers are supposed to be analytical and logical.
Right.
So, where did this actually come from? Because this isn't. Well, first off, Jacob, do you buy into this? Do you believe this?
I feel like I've
Has any
read
merit?
that this is a myth. I feel like I've seen somewhere that this is not the case.
Right. This is
Yeah,
become.
that's what I thought too.
It is, and it is.
It is the case, or it's
It's-
not the case.
Yes.
Wow.
Right.
I've learned a lot.
Left.
So I'll kind of go into how this is definitely pop psychology.
Okay.
But it's not completely without merit. It was just misunderstood,
Okay.
essentially.
Right.
So
Kind of like me.
Nope.
Very much.
Nope. We
so.
understand you.
Not completely without merit, but misunderstood.
I feel like we understand you completely, Jim. We have a strong understanding of Jim
Yeah.
and his lack of flexibility.
So this all kind of started back in 1961. So Roger Wolcott Sperry
Yeah,
was working.
Raj.
Yeah, Roger. Yeah, friend of the show.
Raj.
Raj, as we called him back in school.
Yeah. So I don't think he went to Liberty, actually.
Fun fact, he is left-handed.
Do you know that for a fact?
No,
I don't
he
even know
does
who you're
not.
talking about.
oh, this was a okay. This is
I figure
a
I got like a
Mustang.
50-50 shot at being right. So.
All right. Yeah. So anyway, so he is a neurologist, and he was working with patients with epilepsy. So what they discovered, with epilepsy is the communication and the electricity going back and forth between the two hemispheres. So he was actually doing a lot of work with cats, and I won't go into the detail for anybody who's listening that might be a cat lover. But he
You're talking about
researched
the Broadway play.
Right.
Yeah.
He was the set designer for Cats.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fun fact,
now he's a
most
neurologist.
neurological
He just-
science is born
Yeah.
on Broadway. A lot of people don't
Exactly.
know that.
Very true.
Phantom of the Opera is what gave us the concept of depression.
And Phantoms.
And
And phantoms. And operas.
So what he discovered is that by actually separating the corpus callosum, which is the part of the brain that connects the two hemispheres, by separating that, you could basically stop the seizures from occurring. Right.
Oh,
So
wow.
there's really no big long-term negative consequence behind doing this either. I mean, it does affect memory a little bit, but for the most part, people who had this procedure done could live just a normal life just like everybody else. However, it was after doing this procedure and kind of doing some experiments on these what are known as split brain patients that he was able to identify a lot of interesting things that were occurring, right? So we know that speech is stored in the left hemisphere of the brain. So everything in your body that you do, it's controlled by the opposite hemisphere, right? So your left arm is controlled by your right part of the brain and vice versa. Right leg controlled by the left hemisphere of your brain. But speech is one of the things that is I wouldn't say only, but primarily it's done on the left side of the brain. Your eyes are our eyes are a little bit different because your eyes are kind of split into two, where the right side of your vision is controlled by the left hemisphere. Your left side of your vision is controlled by your right. So it's not per eye. So what was really interesting, what they would do is he could put a screen in front of somebody. So they'd like reach behind a curtain with their left hand. They could pick up an object, say like a pencil, and they would know exactly what it was, but they couldn't say it. Because their left arm was controlled by the right hemisphere of the brain. So when they pick it up, they feel it, they know it's a pencil, but the brain couldn't send the message over to the left hemisphere to actually verbalize what it was.
Huh.
Right? So just kind of a weird phenomenon that would kind of occur. So throughout all of this research, he was able to put together and to be able to identify what different hemispheres of the brain are actually responsible for. So through his experimentation with these patients, he was basically the one that discovered that language and calculation seems to be done in the left hemisphere, and spatial reasoning is done on the right. So this was, he basically made this he kind of described this as being a pattern, but not 100% consistent. So this was actually groundbreaking research, and he ended up winning a Nobel Prize for this later on. I think in 1985, I believe he won.
Yeah, but
a
they'll
Nobel
just
Prize.
give those to anybody, man.
That's true. I know you've got
I've
one as a
applied.
doorstop.
Yeah, I've got one in my office. I just use it to hold papers.
Yeah.
Does anyone believe for a moment that Jim has never applied for a Nobel Prize? Like if there were just an application online to get a Nobel Prize?
I'll go one further and say that he applied, and there's a letter of recommendation under my
Yes.
name that he signed.
Nick sent it in. Yep. Nick has actually recommended me multiple times to the Nobel Committee
Good.
in
Good.
Oslo. Yeah.
I know I did for the governor's Light Award or whatever that
Yep.
was.
Yep. Nick gave a very strongly worded letter to the governor saying that I should be considered for the Point of Light Award, which I received. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, you know what the crazy part about that, Jacob, was? I didn't even get to go to the presentation.
No. He didn't get. Yeah, he didn't get
He
invited.
won
to
the
banquet.
award off of my recommendation, and I didn't even get to go to the banquet dinner.
It was lovely. It was
Yeah.
beautiful.
Wait, how do I win one of these? I want to win one of these awards.
Apparently, all you need to do is write a letter about yourself. And
I have a form letter.
And then, yeah.
Jim,
Then
write a
I'll
letter
send you-
about me.
I'll
I
send
want,
you my-
I want to win this award.
Yeah, I have a
my
template letter from Nick. I'll send it to you.
Great. Yeah. The point of light people are going to be like, this Tangeman guy just recommends people for this award. He loves people getting this award.
You know what? Let's put that
Yeah.
up on Patreon.
Yeah, no, everybody should get one.
Everybody should have. Everybody should have this award. So anyway.
Although if everybody gets it, it makes Jim's less valuable.
Oh,
no,
you know what?
nobody can
I'm
have
posting
one.
that.
That's it.
I will post that this afternoon.
Applications are closed.
In fact, we're pausing the show.
Yeah. Take care, everybody. And thank you for supporting mental health.
Right. So this was all part of his research. So basically, yes, there is what's known as brain lateralization, which means that each hemisphere controls a different part or different processes, which makes sense because it's difficult. It's not really easy, I wouldn't say, for the two hemispheres of the brain to communicate with each other because you're only communicating through that one part of the brain, the corpus callosum.
Right. That makes
So-
sense.
So from an evolutionary perspective, it makes sense that we're really focusing on only important information. We don't want both hemispheres of the brain to be doing the same work. We specialize it. So one hemisphere does one thing, the other does the other, right? So that's kind of where this came out. It was a big study, but then newspapers got a hold of it and started putting a different spin on it. So then it became known as people are more prone to one side's strengths over the other, and that's
Right.
where we get this idea.
And then it becomes like a personality test, like what you're
Exactly.
describing is the machinery of your body and the way that you like store data. Yeah, there's a physical location in the brain tissue where that happens, and it's not, like completely symmetrical where like both sides are both doing the same thing. That would be redundant. So like the brain machine controls different things. That's not the same as saying like, oh, people who are artistic are right-brained.
Yes, exactly. So it kind of became a backwards way of assigning personality. So I am this way. I'm very artistic. I'm not into, math or things like that. I'm very artistic. I'm very creative. Therefore, I must be right-brained.
Right.
And
Or
that's
left.
not really true at all. There's no evidence, there's no research that actually supports that people are prone to use one side over the other.
That's really interesting. So what you were saying earlier is that if listeners want to lobotomize themselves and separate this corpus callosum, there's almost no side effects, and so you're saying that it's mostly fine. They shouldn't have to worry about that.
Yes. Matter of fact, Pod Therapy is going to be selling an at-home kit that you can use.
It's the same one they use at Liberty University.
Yeah, it's just
The holy cleaver. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is how we, dig out the demons.
Exactly.
Gotta get in there. So that's really interesting. So it is kind of a sense, yes, it is scientifically true. There is such thing as a left brain and a right brain, and each of these components having unique functions. But no, it's a myth in the sense that that is not a personality type. That does not designate skills. That does not tell you what you're good at or what your propensities are. So the way we use it in pop culture, right versus left, that's meaningless. That's make-believe. The way a neurologist uses it to describe where things, are functioning, that's useful. That's science.
Right on. Pretty much.
That's fascinating. So how does this play into the whole COVID thing?
That was 15 minutes that we didn't think about COVID.
Yeah, you're welcome, America. Well, I feel like I learned something. And you know what, Nick? I come to you to learn everything because you are, after all, my new teacher. And I'm very excited. Mr. Tangeman, I look forward to being your student. And I feel that you've already distinguished yourself. And hopefully by sucking up, I'm going to continue to get good grades.
Yeah, did we, I know we talked about that on the Patreon version. I don't think our regular listeners know what you're talking about.
No.
So Nick is teaching a clinical supervision course for therapists who would like to become super therapists, and I would like to become one. And so Nick is going to be my teacher for the next 8 weeks. I'm super excited about it. We get to do little webcam things, and I'm supposed to do some kind of sexual favors. I don't know how this works. It's been a while since I've been in school, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works.
Again, I think that was a Liberty University specific thing.
Is that not how this works? Wait a minute. What were your guys' colleges like?
I mean, there was that, but you know.
Yeah, where's the part with the chanting and the robes in the dark room? What do you guys
graduation?
Do that? Okay, that's the last day. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's gonna be fun. So stay tuned. You get to find out how my story's unfolding and whether or not Nick's gonna flunk me. Hopefully not, because I'm trying really hard. I'm gonna do all my homework. I promise.
There actually will be homework. I hope you know that.
Shit, are you serious? Come
of
on,
course.
goddammit.
Yes.
I thought this was just going to be like a seminar. Like, I thought we just tune in, you lecture us, and then we just log out and go home.
It's a workshop.
Oh,
it's not a class, it's a workshop. So we have to actually practice the stuff that I'm teaching.
You have to work in a shop.
In a shop.
Guys, I'm not used to this. I went to Liberty.
You said it,
Where's
pal.
the part when we read the Bible?
It's on your own time.
I think you could literally do that anytime.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything stopping you.
Jim, I hate to break this to you.
I just feel
you're not
I'm
busy.
unprepared. Well, between my rigorous Tiger King, Star Wars, and Marvel schedule, I'm going to see if I can fit in this whole supervision course. So, but yeah, it's going to be fun.
Right on. All right. Well, we're going to take our first break of the day. When we come back, we're going to discuss afternoon anxiety. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's THERAPRODUCER sponsor is Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop. And the week's first trivia question is this. What was the highest selling album of the 1980s? So the entire decade. Holy crap.
Yes.
What was the highest selling album of the entire 1980s? You can post your answer at patreon.com/therapy in this episode's description. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
I'm guessing Thriller.
That's
You're
gotta
correct.
be it.
Hey!
Yes!
Oh,
Got it.
Nailed it. That felt right.
I've got it. I'm sure you owned it at some point.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
Jim, you had Thriller,
Thriller?
right?
No, I do not own that. It's not you don't buy an album.
You did in the 80s.
Well, that's adorable. I don't even know that I was conceived in the 80s.
All right, we're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy. Our next question is about afternoon anxiety.
Hey guys, I have terrible anxiety in the afternoons. I can find loads of tips about morning anxiety and evening anxiety, but it seems harder to find info about afternoon anxiety. Is this more common than I realize? What advice do you guys have on how to manage it? Thanks, Anonymous.
Okay, this is the first time I've ever heard this question.
Yeah, kind of distinguishing between times of anxiety. That's interesting.
It is, because anxiety is not my specialty.
Whoo, it's mine. I live it.
Yeah. But I've never heard it put in this context before of morning
I can
anxiety
relate.
versus afternoon or evening.
Yeah, I can relate to it. So, I've definitely experienced that impatience before where they've described kind of different times of the day that they might be more vulnerable. It usually has more to do, maybe there's a biochemical element to it, but I think it often has more to do with, whether or not they're encountering stressors and whether or not they're experiencing downtime. So, for a lot of us, if you're waking up in the morning, you might have things to do. You might have routines, you take a shower, you get your coffee, you check up on the news or whatever. In the evening time, you might be making dinner, doing your wind down, cleaning up. But if you have that vast, empty, afternoon, I think that there is the opportunity to encounter it. For me, when I've had my strongest anxiety moments during the coronavirus thing, it's been in the early afternoon. So I kind of resonate with the writer. That's whenever I've kind of experienced it. And it usually happens whenever I have vacancy. Like if I'm busy, if I'm like in sessions or I'm doing paperwork or doing something that matters, I'm good. I'm completely fine. But whenever I have literally nothing to do and I'm just like staring outside and I'm like, wow, I am in the void right now. That's whenever the things that cause my anxiety will start creeping up, and I'll over focus on the news, and I'll think about, are we going to be okay? And that's when I have to start using my skills. So to the writer, as somebody who resonates with you, I would tell you that it's interesting that you have tips when it comes to morning and evening anxiety that wouldn't apply to afternoon anxiety. I guess as a therapist, more than I would give you tips of what to do with yourself, I would want you doing different thinking techniques. And there's an episode we have deep in the catalog that goes over something called PAUSE, P-A-U-S-E. And it's a series of questions that you should ask yourself to kind of orient where you're at in relation to the thing that's scaring you. If you're feeling keyed up, if you're feeling frightened, checking in with the thought, finding out what it is, taking it to court. What is causing you fear? What's the emotion that you're feeling? Where is this attached to? And then kind of asking a series of questions, which Nick and I have talked about before, which goes back to cognitive behavioral therapy. And Nick, you've talked about that before, about how do we check in with what's real versus the feeling.
Right. Yes, and that's a big part of what we do, even in addictions treatment. CBT is very helpful, and being able to look at when something happens, how do we internalize it, and what is that message that we are actually repeating in our heads? What is the meaning behind something? So I've said this before in the show several times that it's not the event that causes us distress. It's the meaning that we give the event, right? So when something happens, what is that internal dialogue that happens almost instantaneously and to a large part unconsciously? We don't realize that we give things meaning, but everything has a meaning. So if I'm driving, I'm on the interstate and somebody swerves in front of me and kind of cuts in front of me, my immediate reaction to that could be anger. And I'm mad, and I want to yell at that person and maybe flip them off or something. Where does that come from? Well, it comes from
right brain.
I don't know. No, that's a central brain, because it'd be like your amygdala type. Oh, was that hypothetical? Okay,
that's not
Sorry.
the question.
Anyway. But it's an emotional reaction, so it's that it's anger. But where does the anger come from? The anger comes from fear, right? Because something happened that put my life in danger. And then if we really go back and we really analyze the thought process and the automatic thought that happens, that automatic thought was likely something having to do with intent. So this person knew I was there, and they did this intentionally to do me harm. So that is kind of that internal dialogue, and usually that happens as a result of our past, right? So we've developed a history of thinking and interpreting things in a certain context, and then that just becomes second nature to the point where we don't even recognize it anymore. Whereas if I had a different meaning behind that event, if maybe the meaning I gave it was, oh, this person must not have seen me. Maybe there was something in the road or something they had to move out of the way real quick. They didn't know I was there, or maybe it was a blind spot. Well, now that changes my emotional reaction, because I'm no longer looking at it as somebody put my life in danger intentionally. It's more of, this was an accident. Okay, things happen. And none of that actually changes the situation. The situation is exactly the same. The meaning that I gave it was different, and then ultimately the meaning that I gave it influenced my emotions. So the more you practice this, the better you get at it, and you can actually start taking more control over your emotions by simply kind of changing the way that you look at things. But I mean, the other thing that was kind of interesting to this too, kind of an interesting take that I had on this, was that, again, like, I'm not really all that familiar with morning versus evening versus afternoon anxiety, and my brain automatically goes to looking at something that's outside of the brain, not necessarily a biological reaction as far as neurotransmitters or anything like that, but more situational, like what you were talking about. So the afternoon being like, well, if that's kind of my time where I kind of get distracted and maybe that has an effect. I was also thinking about other things such as maybe it has something to do with your diet, the way that we eat, how we schedule meals. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that has something to do with when we experience anxiety over other times.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think one of the things that's tricky about anxiety is it is situational, it is cognitive, it can also be biological. And so sometimes it is, how much caffeine have you had today? What's your dietary regimen like? Are you doing anything with your body, with your mind to kind of vent? But one more tip to the writer that I'd want you to try out for me, and this goes to everybody. If you're experiencing strong anxiety, if you're experiencing strong depression, I really want you to get in the habit of journaling, but I know a lot of people don't like to take out a pen and paper and write. And so one challenge I'll give you is to open up the voice memo on your phone and capture these moments in time. Take a walk around the block. Go into a quiet place. Go get in your car and just sit there, and in the daytime or in the nighttime, pull out your phone, hit record, and just log it and just say, hey, here's the date. And I'm just capturing my truth right now. And I think that that's so valuable, guys, not just because the concept of journaling is a way to sort of develop insight, but whenever you're verbalizing and you're having to verbalize emotion and talk through the problem and explain it in a sense, and you're almost imagining that you're creating this time capsule that maybe future generations will one day look back and study, what was this coronavirus, pandemic like? And here are these little artifacts. If you imagine that that's kind of what you're doing and you're sort of telling your truth so that, 300 years in the future they can understand what it was like for you, there's something very profound about metabolizing that energy. And so that is, I think, for me, been a very helpful tool that I'll journal, and I tend to journal in audio format through the voice recorder technology. But I think that is something I'd like to see you do too, writer, because I think that it's multidimensional. You're giving information, you're also languaging it. I think it metabolizes the energy. It feels productive. And then what's really neat is you've saved something that maybe one day in the future you can go back to and say, wow, this was a profound experience. That's what it was like in April of 2020. My goodness, how much the world has changed. So it's kind of this timestamp thing that I think is really helpful historically as well.
Well, I think journaling can also be helpful to help identify patterns too. That's the way that I've always used it in the past with people that I've worked with, is to be able to just write down your thoughts, and then maybe a week later go back and read some of them, and then look at them not as just one specific time, but look at them collectively as a group. So what are the things that you're noticing? This is always happening right around the same time of day. What's going on those days? And what about some of the differences? Are there times when you experience higher levels of anxiety than others? And, what could possibly be causing that? I think part of the nice part about journaling too is you can also use it to gauge intensity, right? So like on a scale of 0 to 10, being able to identify what your current anxiety level is and be able to track that over time. I think that would be useful, because ultimately, for me, I guess the way that I've always used it is really for data collection, to get a better understanding of patterns. And then once we understand those, then we can start manipulating certain factors and seeing if that has any kind of impact.
Yeah. My last thought on it, to the writer, is remember that for those of us who deal with anxiety, and I've had a lifelong relationship with it, remember that our goal is not to be anxiety free, to just be a flat line, because that's not likely for us. The way you want to look at an anxiety disorder is almost like we have a hyperactive smoke alarm in our house. And it goes off, whenever we're like making toast or like cooking brownies or something like that. And it's really frustrating because there is no fire, there is no danger, but this alarm system feels like it's going off inside of us. And so the real goal with anxiety work is not to eliminate that, but to have the tools in our tool belt that when the alarm is going off, we can quickly address it so that we can quickly bring down that curve and we can have relief. And so that's the thing I want you to be thinking about, writer, is studying your anxiety the way Nick's talking about, noticing when it's coming. I think you're doing a good job of that already by noticing it in the afternoons. And then creating a few tools that you might use when you're feeling elevated, such as using pause to talk to yourself, such as doing audio journaling or in writing journaling, or such as downloading a meditation app like Headspace and hitting play on that and just kind of doing some meditation. Another thing you might want to try is a 5-sense check-in. And a 5-sense check-in is whenever you sit quietly in a room and one by one you identify one of your 5 senses and you try just using that sense to take in your surroundings and identify everything that you can observe using just that sense. So like with touch, you'll have your eyes closed and you'll just allow your hands to just touch the furniture, to touch the fabric, to feel the temperature of the air, to feel surfaces, to feel the tension in things. With sound, obviously you'll listen to the wind blowing outside, you'll hear the air conditioning in your house, you'll hear a TV in the other room. You just kind of allow those things to take stock of the room for about 30 seconds to a minute. And then you finish with sight, because that's obviously the one that brings you to the now. And you just quietly look around the room and you identify the texture of things, the lighting, the shading of things, the color of things, and you allow yourself to just kind of absorb with each sense. And what that does is it kind of slows down your brain and it sort of turns down the volume on that fire alarm because it's convincing the anxiety, panic part of your brain that you're in a safe place and that you're not in danger. And it's this very visceral technique that you might want to add to your tool belt. But love the question. And I think a lot of us relate to that, and I really hope that you start playing with some of these tools and hopefully having some relief.
Definitely. Thanks for writing in.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take our next break, and when we come back, we will discuss compassionate pain. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's other THERAPRODUCER sponsor is Dr. Ben Don. Dr. Ben Don would like to channel his inner Samuel L. Jackson and politely request that everyone stay the fuck at home. If you'd like to join Dr. Ben Don, you can go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
I think it's Thriller.
Thriller, yes. We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy. Our next question is about compassionate pain.
Actually, I believe it's Die Hard 3. I think that's the one with Sam Jackson. I want to say.
Got it.
Or is it Die Hard 2? Is it Die Hard 3? Is that the one where they're running through New York and on that scavenger hunt?
I don't care.
Okay.
I don't know.
No, I know what you're talking
You guys
about.
judge me. You guys have not seen Die Hard?
No, we've seen it.
I haven't seen it.
Oh. I've seen it.
Oh. You
No,
need
like-
to watch all of them.
Yeah, I know.
It's
on my
That's
list.
in the pantheon. That you got okay.
Oh, no, Die Hard is great.
compassionate pain.
Yeah, it's
There is no compassionate pain in Die Hard. Any of them.
No.
There's really no better time to watch Die Hard than right now. I should just
I would
be
watch
watching
them all.
movies all the time now.
Yes. No, you should absolutely add all 4 Die Hards to your list.
You haven't seen any of the Die Hard movies?
No, none of them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's worse than not
That's
seeing
a
Silence of
big
the
missing
Lambs.
You know what this it's going to get even worse. You know what? I've only seen Terminator 1. I've never seen any of the other
what?
Terminator movies either.
I just watched the latest Terminator like 2 weeks ago. The one where
With Christian
Linda
Bale?
Hamilton
Yeah,
came back.
she's back.
No. There's
that one.
the Christian Bale one is like 2 Terminator movies ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, the latest one, Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton are both back, reprising both of their roles, and it is surprisingly good.
Really?
It's
Okay.
not a great movie,
Okay.
but it is exactly what I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
Which is like guilty pleasure. Here's a Terminator movie.
Yeah.
Let's have some fun.
Yeah.
Terminator 2 is, I think,
Terminator
the most
2 is-
iconic one in the series.
That's what
Yeah.
I've heard. Everybody. I've seen half of it. I've only seen the first half. I haven't seen
Terminator
the rest
2 is one of the single digits. Like they're I can count them on one hand the time that sequels were better than the originals.
Oh yeah.
And Terminator 2 is on that list.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
100%
And Terminator
it's
2
on that
is
list.
much better than Terminator. And Terminator
Yes.
is not bad,
Yeah.
but Terminator 2 is much better. It's not close.
Okay.
You don't watch it and go
Yeah.
like, it might be a little better. You watch it, you're like, oh shit, that's a lot better.
Yeah, no, Terminator 2, Aladdin 2, Return of Jafar. These are the ones that really outshine the original.
Obviously.
Yeah. A lot of people don't think of it, but in the same weight class, really, really good. Hey guys, I am a very compassionate person. How do I sustain life in a world full of turmoil? I see so much going on, and I can't keep from feeling so drained. I work in healthcare, and I see it all day. Then I come home, and I see it on TV. I love animals and volunteer at a shelter. I see and feel so much pain for those animals. They have no idea what's going on in this world. How do you keep your energy calm to help others and animals stay calm? I'm a strong believer that our energy affects other people, whether we use words or not. Thanks, Anonymous.
Die Hard 3, Die Hard with a Vengeance is the one that has Samuel L.
That's
Jackson
the one.
in it.
That's
Okay.
Sam Jackson. Oh,
go.
it's so
Yeah.
good.
Not to be
His name
confused
is
with
Zeus.
Die Hard 4, which is Live Free or Die Hard, or Die Hard 5, A Good Day to Die Hard.
There's a Die Hard 5?
There is.
Oh, my
2013.
God. Okay. Oh,
1988 was the first one. 2013 was the fifth one.
Oh, wow.
That's-
When I
range.
think of Bruce
Quite a span.
Willis, I think of John McClane. He is John McClane. That's who he is. I think in almost every Bruce Willis movie, he's essentially just John McClane in a new context.
You think John McClane is an actor?
Yes. That
Got
is. I think Bruce Willis is the alter ego. I think
reprising
John
his role
McClane-
as Bruce Willis.
I'm perfectly
As
fine
Bruce Willis.
with Bruce Willis is just a character played by John McClane. John McCain. John McCain?
oh,
That's a
John
different
McCain
guy.
would be even better.
John McCain.
All right.
Rest in peace, Senator.
I'm a maverick. That's my John McCain impression. Look at me, I'm a maverick.
Very good.
Spot
Look out,
on.
Goose.
That's amazing.
Sorry, wrong maverick.
That's a different Maverick.
All right. Okay, so compassionate pain.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. I feel like we're getting a lot of these questions because everybody's dealing with this. If you,
Yeah.
to our writer, if you are able to join us and would like to join us on our Zoom meeting that we're going to have this week, please feel free to do so. Find it in Patreon or reach out to us and we'll get you the link. I think that's one way of doing it. I think reaching out to other people and connecting with other people can definitely help deal with this. I think we kind of get isolated, and then our interactions that we do have with other people always seem to be, kind of about what's going on, but I don't think we ever actually have the opportunity to kind of process what's going on. I think we're so caught up in the moment that we don't actually get a chance to go through it.
Yeah.
So that's one thing one piece of advice I would have.
Yeah, and I'm actually seeing this in a lot of my patients, and it's interesting because if you are an empathic person, by nature, if you consider yourself very empathic, and I think the writer kind of is sending that signal, and I've seen this in some patients, this era that we're living through is so hard. Because you as an individual are being affected by this, and so it's disrupting your life, it's scary in its own right, and that can be really discouraging. But if you go anywhere in society, anything online, anything you're seeing in the news, you're seeing a barrage of stories. And they're sad, and they're scary. They're people saying goodbye to loved ones via radio. Their entire economies being destroyed. They're the restaurant that was family-owned going under after 3 generations. It's just watching so much human misery and so much human fear and so much sadness. And I think if you're an empathic person, it is overwhelming. And that's what this writer's kind of talking about, especially when you're working in healthcare and you're kind of watching and trying to help with people, and then that's who you are by nature.
Yeah.
And so this is a really good question, Nick. It's
Well,
something
and-
you and I have trained students on, compassion fatigue.
Yeah, and I kind of reading this. So she or she is a healthcare worker, and then volunteers at an animal shelter.
Yeah.
Like, just being a healthcare worker right now would be stressful enough. Independently, just volunteering at a shelter would be difficult just by itself. And, if you're an animal lover like I am, that would be very difficult to do both of them at the same time. I mean, when's the last time that this writer's done anything for themselves?
Exactly.
It seems like to our writer, I guess, just from what you've said, it seems like you're sure giving an awful lot of yourself without refilling the tank.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this comes back to something that we have to train a lot of our therapists in, which is how to guard against compassion fatigue. And to the writer, I think that you're a wonderful person. Obviously, we admire you. You're out there doing your job. You're giving of yourself to others. You are the kind of human that, everybody likes. And at the same time, though, when you're a natural empath, you have to do the self-care of guarding your own heart against too much intake of pain, suffering, and problems. And that feels weird to sort of guard yourself, to almost shut your eyes and shut your ears to the suffering out in the world and to step away from it. But you do have to, and you have to look at the world you're seeing as almost a diet, almost as a nutritional diet for your mind. And you have to ask yourself, how much of the poison of human suffering and biological suffering and animal suffering can I drink of before it begins to be toxic for me, before I lose myself? And so this comes back to this idea that we teach students, which is compassion fatigue. Whenever you are in charge of helping other people, you can become tired and you can get secondhand trauma where now you're starting to suffer and your spirit is starting to drop. And it's hard to just wash that off when you get home from work. You take off your scrubs, you hang up your shoes, and now it's time to just go back to, life. It's hard to just go back. And a lot of times you're carrying that around with you. And I think what the writer talked about, Nick, saying the energy, that there is something of an energy that we carry around with us. I think you and I are not very known for being on the woo-woo side of things, chi and energy and crap like that. But I actually think that the writer's correct in this regard. I think that animals can kind of sense a tension inside of us. I think other people can kind of sense an emotional tension, a discouragement, a sadness. And even if we try to fake it for them, it does affect other people. I mean, you have 2 dogs. I'm sure you can tell that that's true.
Oh, yeah. I mean, not just with animals, but people do that as well. We can sense that in other people. 100%.
So when we think about compassion fatigue, Nick, and you're teaching a class that I'm actually going to be a part of, which is going to talk about how to be a leader to other therapists and how to train other therapists and be useful to them. And, I'm sure one of the things we're going to talk about is taking care of your student, taking care of your intern, and teaching them self-care and teaching them how to protect themselves, because this is a normal part of being a healthcare provider in whatever it is that you do. And I think non-healthcare providers, empathic people as a general rule, are really vulnerable to this. But one tip that I would have for the writer is giving yourself permission to turn off your awareness of the problem. You have to give yourself permission to turn off your phone, to turn off the news, to not hear sad things, to watch happy things, to listen to happy podcasts, to escape the sadness of reality and give yourself almost a safe space, almost a cocoon of good vibes, good data, good songs, good energy, positive things. And you kind of have to allow yourself to sort of marinate in that from time to time and sort of shut out the negativity. And even though that's an artificial thing, like you're choosing to be blind and deaf to some of the suffering of the world, you have to understand that if you just constantly sit there and stare at suffering, it will have an effect on you. You're not learning anything from more exposure to human suffering and animal suffering. You're not gaining insight. You're just being emotionally abused. And so at some point, I want you to create that barrier, that boundary, and give yourself a safe place to escape to where you can marinate just in good content.
And I think one of the reasons why most people struggle doing that is because I think sometimes they believe that if they do that, if they do kind of give themselves permission to turn it off or to give themselves permission to laugh at something, that they're not taking it seriously. Like they've convinced themselves, well, I shouldn't be laughing at this time. This is a very serious deal, and something really serious happened, and so I need to be 100% focused on that. And if I have any kind of enjoyment, then it's kind of sending a mixed signal. Like, why should I be happy? You know, I think about this a lot with interns that I've worked with in the past, where we work in drug and alcohol treatments at a time, during our opioid epidemic, and people are dying a lot, and that's been a struggle for a lot of interns that I've worked with, how to handle loss. And it's kind of one of those things where they feel like, well, I need to be miserable right now. This person died. I should be feeling terrible. And I always try to correct that and say, well, there's no should. You don't have to feel a certain way. You feel whatever you feel, right? And if you feel terrible about this situation, yeah, that's normal, but that doesn't mean that when you go home tonight, if you want to check out, and for me, I always watch stand-up comedy. Like that I think kept me sane through most of my career, is just being able to go home, check out, watch some stand-up comedy on TV or Netflix or Pandora or something, and just give myself permission to laugh. If you don't do that, you burn out. You just don't last. You don't last very long. And to our writer, you work in the healthcare field. I'm assuming you enjoy your work. You definitely, it says you love animals and you volunteer at the shelter. I'm sure you want to continue doing that. If you want to continue doing these things, you have to allow yourself time to check out. And when you do that, you have to be able to give yourself permission to do it. That it doesn't mean that you're not serious about what you're doing. It doesn't mean you're ineffective at what you're doing. You have to be able to do that. I was at a training one time. This is probably 10 years ago. And it was taught by this guy, and I loved the training. I thought it was really good. But one thing that I just kind of disagreed with him about is, sometimes we have to laugh. With the work that we do, we have to make jokes about something. And right. Sometimes it comes off in poor taste, and obviously we should be held accountable to that. But there's times where we, some of the funniest people I know are therapists, because when they're done working, like
literally no one has ever said that sentence before.
I said the funniest people I know. You and I know different people. In my circle. But I mean, like, it's one of those things. It's kind of like that dark sense of humor, where it's like, if we don't,
humor.
Yeah, if we don't laugh about it, we'll cry about it. So we choose to laugh about it, And this guy that was doing this training was saying how we need to be more serious in our jobs and not make light of things. And I disagree with that. I think
that's so true. I disagree with the guy too. Yeah. I think you're right. But, sorry I stepped on your point. But, I agree with you. I think that, the gallows humor, in my opinion, and I think anybody who works in healthcare, we just know that that's part of how you cope. I have a patient who is working in the ER during this outbreak. And I asked this person the other day, how are you coping with this? How are you dealing with this much human suffering in front of you, this much fear? Their family is quarantined away from them so that they can't infect them. I mean, they are constantly surrounded by this. This person was telling me that when they go to eat at the hospital cafeteria, none of the other healthcare workers that are this person's friend will even sit with them at the table, because this individual works in the ER and these other people work on different floors. And so it is a lonely road right now. And I asked this person, how are you coping? And that's exactly what they said, Nick. They said gallows humor. They said, me and all the other ER people, we have got dark, dirty senses of humor, and it's probably not appropriate. It's probably not the kind of thing that any of us would like, played on tape if we were running for political office. But right now it's getting us through it. And so I think that there's a lot of truth to that too.
Yeah. And you can do that and still care about people. And still be empathetic. But I think that's the thing, that sometimes people just don't think that those two can go together. I think
the last thing I want to say to the writer, because I think that this is also relevant. We're talking about your self-care, and that's important, and I hope that you hear our message in that. But another thing that I think applies to the broader audience, during the Patreon part of the show, we were talking about how right now it's projected that in the week that this episode drops and in the week to follow, this is probably going to be the peak part of that curve that everybody talks about, where there's going to be a lot of deaths. And so it's going to be a pretty important season of American history, and this is the time when a lot of bad things are going to happen. And so a quick piece of information to the general audience, because the writer talks about how do I help other people, right? The writer's talking about being worried about helping other people. And that provokes me to want to just take a moment to tell everybody there's a saying that we use as therapists when we are encountering the grief of others. And you've heard me talk about grief on the show and how I believe that grieving is a good way to think about what's happening with Corona. A lot of you guys saw that I posted that on our website, podtherapy.net. There's an article about grieving again and talking about how I think it lines up with this. But I want to talk for a moment about how we as healthcare providers and as therapists react to the grieving of other people. Because I think that knowing how we react to that is going to be useful to all of you in the near future. Because I think you're going to be experiencing the grieving of other people as people die and as scary things happen in the communities. We have a saying, which is, don't just do something, stand there. And it's reversing that old saying of don't just stand there, do something. Don't just do something, stand there. And what we're trying to say in that, and we teach this to our interns a lot, is that you're going to feel the need to do something whenever somebody else is suffering. You're going to feel the need to save them, to rescue them, to make a joke, to try to make it better. You can't. And sometimes the most authentic and meaningful thing you can do for somebody who is in pain is just to be present with them and to just stand there and hear them and listen to them sob or say nothing at all. And one metaphor we often use is describing pain and grief almost as a thick black smoke that's just filling the room or filling the life of another person. And by just being present and breathing that smoke in on their behalf, you're removing some of the smoke from the room. And that's an absolutely valuable thing to do. Mm-hmm. It's just to inhale. And so I just want to say that as a quick bookmark to this writer, because you are talking about how can I help other people when I'm experiencing so much pain. And I think the other side of that is how can the general audience help other people as we are entering into the season of sadness that's probably about to sweep over our nation. Don't just do something, folks. Stand there. Just be present with people in their pain. That is actually the kindest thing you can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so thank you for writing in. Appreciate that, and keep us posted. Let us know.
Yeah, rooting for you, friend. Hope you'll join us in the support group. It's
going
to be this Thursday when this episode airs for the general audience and the day after this episode airs for the Patreon folks. But feel free to join us. Go to patreon.com/therapy, and you will see a post that talks about the Zoom support group. And click on that, and if you're not a supporter but you still want access, just email us, podtherapyguys@gmail.com, and we'll be happy to invite you.
All right, we've reached the end of the show, amazingly. Time for apologies, patrons, reviews, and announcements. So as far as announcements go, Richard Bruins has taken the initiative with the Flat Nick and Jim. But unfortunately, I don't know if you've seen it, Jim, but I can't find it.
I've seen it. It's amazing. It's in the community tab of the Patreon.
Where's that?
So you have to go onto Patreon,
yeah.
And then on the there'll be like a tab that says posts, and then there's a tab that says about, and there's a tab that says community.
Oh.
And actually, people have posted stuff there over the years, and it's really funny because there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. Flat Nick and Jim is a project that we did. We had originally intended to do it like Flat Stanley, where there's little cartoon characters of us, and we were going to send them in the mail. Obviously, during this time, we don't want people touching the same object, and so we did it digitally, where basically instead we posted cartoon characters that Kate Keller created for us of both of us. And people are printing them out and decorating them. So people are turning them into basically just artwork. They're just coloring them, and then they're bringing Nick and Jim along to condescendingly lecture people in their lives or whatever. So Richard took it and he superimposed this art that she created onto our logo. And it is amazing. You need to go look at this thing. It's in the community tab, patreon.com/therapy.
Okay, I'll check
Click
that out.
community.
I couldn't figure out where it was located.
Super cool.
So
Oh, it's so good. Like you can clearly tell that Richard is still quarantined and has nothing to do because it is expertly photoshopped. Like it is well done. It could actually be our logo. If like we loved it, we could just make it the logo. It's that good.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
Special thanks to Kate Keller who created the art for us, and special thanks to Richard who immediately swept up on that opportunity. And thank you to all of you who are enjoying Flat Nick and Jim and for your wonderful coloring creations. Make sure you tag us if you post it on social media so that we can share it with others.
Yeah, and while we're thanking, special thanks to Ulrika. Have you seen this? She sent a quarantine
Oh my God,
book.
I showed my wife. We laughed our asses off. It is so funny.
Yeah, pretty good.
She sent us a quarantine activity book, and it's like 13-page PDF, and it's for adults, and it is hilarious.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
We should post it. I think we'll post that on the Patreon too, so you guys should be able to have access to it too.
Definitely. New THERAPAL this week. 2 new THERAPALs. Thank you to Daniel O'Connell and Shoeless Scoop. Thanks for joining.
Yep, and I will do a quick shout out. We apologize we didn't get this to the first episode of the month because I think the first episode of April actually already aired, so this will be the second episode of April. But at the beginning of every month, we like to thank all of our THERAPODs, our Theradactyls, and of course we thank our TheraProducers every episode. But I want to thank our THERAPODs. Thank you, Adam Rabiznik, Andrew Frozen Cusser, Angel Ellis, I'm going to say.
Angie.
Brad Keefe. Angie, oh, there it is. Angie Ellis. Brad Kefauver, Chelsea Lamb, Corey McTits, Craig Little, Curtis Kiwi Scoop Hanlon, David Sorensen, Don Dorr, Elliot Lamb, E.Z. Whip, Ezekiel Lawrence, Felicia Butler, Fred Bashara Jr., Gavin Bristow, Heather Psychotic Scoop, Crace Hylian Scoop, welcome to the party, Ian Whitefowl, James Cole, Jeffrey Ackerman, Jessica Vint, Jim Hunter, John DeLong, Joseph Pengrazio, Carrie Terhark, a.k.a. Nick's sister, Katie Chiwilowski, you say that one. That one. Kenneth Liu, Kenneth Soto, Lori Eltzroth, Linda Brandmeier, Lindsay Bashara, Matthew Nair, Malaya Okie Scoop, Richard Bruins, Robert Paulson, Scoopaholic, Scoopiter Ascending, Scoopstronaut, Shayla Bullock out there in Utah making her martinis, Stacy Westerlin, a.k.a. Frozen 49th, Tess Miller, a.k.a. our Canadian friend up there with Linda B., 3 Scoops a Lady, Todd Canfield, and Tracy Replogle, a.k.a. my mom.
And thank you to our...
She's a bat.
Who is a bat?
I can't make bat sounds, so I'll just say bat sound. Jim's mom! Oh, yeah. That's even better. Thank you to our flock of pterodactyls. Is it called a flock? I don't know.
I want to say it's a flock.
Sure, we'll say it is. Andrea Anderson, Brian Lehman, Dan Martin, David Pollock, Ice Blue Scoop, Kate Keller, Leon Kassab, Mason Miller, Sally Boop Scoop, Scott Brady, Tom Morrison, and Cindy Ash. Thank you.
I think we should call it a gaggle. I think it should be a gaggle of pterodactyls. I think that is the proper nomenclature. I'm going to advocate for that. And we also want to thank our bosses, the Elite Eight, the mysterious and shrouded Illuminati members of our fan club, the THERAPRODUCERS. Thank you, Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Chairman of the Board, Robert Brownie Jr., Mint, Vice Chairman of the Board, Kayla Lansbury, David, Data Scoop Violon, Judy Schneider, Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Dawn, and ex officio board members Elio Dare and Crazy Banana Scoop.
And if you'd like to hear this episode uncut and unedited and enjoy our spontaneous side projects, go to patreon.com/therapy. And thank you for supporting mental health.
That's all the time that we've got for this week's session. We want to thank our landlords, the Ice Cream Social Podcast, and thanks to those of you who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Share this episode with someone who needs it by opening this episode's description in your podcast app and copying and pasting that link we provided into your social media. Don't forget, you can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter @PodTherapyGuys, and at patreon.com/therapy.
Do you want to submit a question to the show? Ask anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. I'm Nick Tanchman.
I'm John McClane.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.
You
Laura's still a
Yippee-ki-yay,
Nazi.
motherfucker.